guys, welcome back to The Bright Side. Macy here, the Bright Side Girl, and today we're going to be doing some fairy tale recommendations. In case you somehow missed it, Retoldathon, which is my retelling themed readathon, is happening August 7th through August 20th. It's coming up so fast. I wanted to give you one more official recommendation video in case you needed some last minute ideas to add to your TBR. So this is going to be strictly on fairy tales. We're going to go by different fairy tales. I tried to find like an official list of what was considered a fairy tale, and I had a hard time like nailing it down. So these are just ones that I'm pretty sure are fairy tales. We don't have things like Peter Pan and Alice in Wonderland because they're not technically fairy tales, but I think I've got a pretty good list overall. Some of these categories I have read more than the books I'm going to share with you, but I wanted to keep this strictly to books that I have read and leave it open so that I could film specific recommendation videos sometime in the future with a little bit more detail on each category. But for now, we're going to give you a little bit of everything, so hopefully you enjoy this video. Alright, so first up we're going to start off with Red Riding Hood because I am in a Red Riding Hood mood and I don't know why. I realize that I love a lot of Red Riding Hood retellings. I've actually read more than this. I plan to read one or two for the readathon as well, but these two are my current favorites. We have Sisters Red by Jackson Pierce. This is the first book in a fairy tale series that each follow different fairy tales, but they do all connect, so I do recommend you start with this one. And this is following two sisters and their grandmother trained them to hunt Fenris, which are basically like werewolves that come and kill teenage girls. They witnessed their grandmother dying and they grew up, and that's what they do for a living, is they go to different towns and they fight these Fenris, and they have different ways of finding them. This is so good. It's so much fun. Our main character is like strong and feisty, and she kind of trains her younger sister and takes care of her. There's a cute little romance in here. I love this series so much. I love how all of the books tie together, so I really recommend you read this first one because they have little clues and things that go into the next fairy tale, and even though you follow different characters, they kind of all tie together. I love it so much. I binged this whole series last year. This is the only one I know that has an audiobook. I physically read all the other ones, but one of my absolute favorites. Then Crimson Bound by Rosamund Hodge. This is set in the same world as Cruel Beauty, which we'll talk about in a second, but you don't have to read them in order. So this is a very, very awesome Red Riding Hood retelling. I believe this one is set mostly in a palace, so it will work for that prompt as well. When Rachel was 15, she was good, apprenticed to her aunt and in training to protect her village from dark magic. But when Rachel was 15, she was also reckless, straying from the forest path in pursuit of a way to free her world from the threat of eternal darkness. After an illicit meeting goes dreadfully wrong, Rachel is forced to make a terrible choice that binds her to the very evil that she hoped to defeat. It's a pretty loose retelling, but I highly recommend it. Rosamund's writing style is so lush and descriptive and beautiful. The audiobooks for this and Cruel Beauty are so good. Our narrator is phenomenal. She's so like chill and relaxing, but you still are invested in the story. I love the audio so much, and these are ones that I always want to reread. Next we have Beauty and the Beast. I'm actually going to share three because I had a hard time narrowing it down because I've read the most of these. It might be my favorite retelling to read, I'm not sure, but we have Hunted by Megan Spooner. Megan Spooner is such a good writer. She also wrote Sherwood, which is a Sherlock retelling that I highly recommend. But Hunted is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. Beauty knows the Beast's forest in her bones and in her blood. She knows the forest holds secrets and that her father is the only hunter who's ever come close to discovering them. But Eva's grown up far from her father's old lodge, raised to be a part of the city's highest castle of aristocrats. Still, she's never forgotten the feel of a bow in her hands, and she's spent a lifetime longing for the freedom of the hunt. Such a unique retelling, and this book is so cool. It has like little letters that are being told from the Beast's perspective, and it's just very, very unique. And I really enjoyed it. So we have Cruel Beauty by Rosamund Hodge. Her covers are so stunning. This is so good and so unique. I constantly want to reread it. Since birth, Nyx has been betrothed to the evil ruler of the kingdom, all because of a reckless bargain her father made at her birth, and she has been training to kill him. Betrayed by her family, yet bound to obey, Nyx rails against her fate, and still on her 17th birthday, she abandons everything she's ever known to marry the all-powerful, immortal Ignifex. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Her plan is to seduce him, disarm him, and break the 900-year-old curse he put on her people. So it's such a unique retelling, and it's so good, it's so enchanting, it sucks you in, and the writing is beautiful. Then we have my favorite Beauty and the Beast retelling retelling, and that is Uprooted by Naomi Novik. All the ones I've talked about so far are young adult. This is considered adult. It's still like a very easy read. This one is so good, and this book is one that has a little bit of spice in it. I really enjoyed it, and it wasn't like the main focus of the book, but it was really, really nice. So it has like a million blurbs. If you guys haven't read this book, you need to check it out. It's definitely a little on the slower side, but the world building and everything is so unique. So Agnieszka loves her valley home, her quiet village, the forest, and the bright shining river. But the corrupted woods stand on the border full of malevolent power, and its shadows lie over her life. Her people rely on the cold-driven wizard known only as the dragon to keep its powers at bay, but he demands a terrible price for his help. One young woman handed over to serve him for 10 years, a fate almost as terrible as falling into the wood. So we have this guy, and he comes and he takes these girls, and you never know what happens to them, and it's just got a really cool Beauty and the Beast retelling. The woods in here are so magical. Definitely has a slower vibe. I physically read this one. I want to do the audio sometime because I love it. I want to reread all of these now that I'm telling you about them because they're so good. I just love retellings, and this is just such an excellent one that you need to check out. Next up we have The Little Mermaid, because I didn't get a chance to do my Little Mermaid retelling recommendation video like I was planning. I did do a short one on Instagram, but we're just going to share two today because I've read a ton. And these are the closest to the original fairy tale that I have found. So Mermaid by Carolyn Turgeon is the closest one that I have found. But this one's also more about like sisterhood than it is the romance portion. The twist is very unique. The writing is so lovely. The original fairy tale is very dark. It's much darker than the Disney movie, as all of these are, but this is such a unique twist on the story, and it follows it just enough but has its own uniqueness as well, and it's one of my favorites. Then we have The Surface Breaks by Louisa O'Neill. So this is kind of a feminist retake on The Little Mermaid that I super enjoyed. I read this last year for Mermaid Marathon. Obedience is a trap, beauty is a lie, escape is a distant shore. Deep beneath the sea of the cold Irish coast, Gaia is a young mermaid who dreams of freedom from her controlling father. On her first swim to the surface, she's drawn towards a human boy, and she longs to join his carefree world, but how much will she sacrifice? This one's so good. It's a little bit darker, a little bit grittier. This is young adult. I think this is more adult, but this is young adult, and I enjoyed them both so much. Then we have The 12 Dancing Princesses, which I take it back. This might be my favorite fairy tale to read about. So we have House of Salt and Sorrows by Erin A. Craig. I know some of you read this for Mermaid Marathon. It doesn't have mermaids in it, but it's set like at sea and it has these coastal vibes. This one works for so many readathons because it's also got like a spooky atmosphere to it, so you could read it for Not So Scary-a-thon in the fall. The original fairy tale of The 12 Dancing Princesses is so good. It's 12 sisters, they live in a kingdom, they're supposed to be getting trained to get married, and they keep escaping somehow every night and tearing their shoes up, and when their father comes and finds them, their shoes are all torn up, and he's like locked them in their room, so he doesn't know how they're getting out. So he hires these different princes to come and like figure it out, and whoever can figure it out gets to marry one of the girls. That's the original fairy tale. So in this one, we've got that same kind of a premise, but the girls are slowly dying one by one, and you also have to solve that mystery, and we've got this cool coastal setting. I loved it so much. I just love the whimsicalness of the dance that they go to. It's just so fun and magical. It's definitely got a little bit of a darker vibe, but I wouldn't consider it scary. I'm actually getting ready to reread this sometime soon because the second book just came out and it follows a different sister. So that's very exciting. I love Erin A. Craig. Then a lesser known one, Entwined by Heather Dixon. I think I like this one maybe even more than House of Salt and Sorrows. It's so good. It's set kind of at Christmas time, which is kind of fun. So we have Azalea is trapped just when she should feel everything is before her. Beautiful gowns, dashing suitors, balls filled with dancing. It's taken away all of it. The keeper understands he's trapped too, held for centuries within the walls of the palace, and so he extends an invitation. Every night, Azalea and her 11 sisters may step through the enchanted passage in their room to dance in his silver forest, but there is a cost. The keeper likes to keep things. Azalea may not realize how tangled she is in his web until it is too late. So good. So if you like those like Caraval vibes with like legend, and we have a character like that in like Hotel Magnifique, and Jax from Once Upon a Broken Heart, where like there's this grand kind of puppet master that has like this big party. We've got those vibes in here, and it is so freaking good. Loved it so much. And both of these are young adult. And this will also work for the set in a castle prompt. All right, next we have Cinderella, and I've only read a couple Cinderella retellings, so my favorite is Cinder by Marissa Meyer. Of course, this is part of a full fairy tale series that's sci-fi, and it follows different fairy tales. We'll talk about a couple of them a little bit later. Again, this is one that you absolutely have to read in order. They do follow different characters, but all the characters kind of come into play, and it's one big overarching story. So in this one, Cinderella is a cyborg. She was found as a young girl and kind of rescued after an accident, and she has some like robotic parts, and because of that, people look down on her, and her stepsister and her stepmother don't treat her very good for the most part, and the man that saved her is no longer with us. And we have a plague in this one, and she is a mechanic, and it's just so interesting and so much fun. The audios are amazing, done by Rebecca Solar, who's my favorite narrator. Cannot recommend them enough. Love this Cinderella retelling. They are sci-fi, but they're not hard to follow, so don't be scared. Then we have Stepsister by Jennifer Donnelly. So this one follows one of the stepsisters from Cinderella. I think this is YA, but it might be considered middle grade. And this one is just really sweet and thoughtful and a little bit feminist, a little bit heartbreaking, and it talks about like what it's like to be an ugly stepsister. And it was just really, really enjoyable, and I thought it was really excellent. So highly recommend. Okay, next up we have Rapunzel. So I've only read 2 Rapunzel retellings. So we have Cress from the Lunar Chronicles, like I talked about earlier. So this is the 3rd book. So again, you need to read the first 2 before you get to this one, but it is very cool. Rapunzel is kept in a satellite instead of a tower, and the love interest in here is one of my favorites ever. It's just so much fun. But make sure you read Cinder and Scarlet before you get to this one. Fairest of Them All by Carolyn Turgeon, which is a Rapunzel / Evil Queen from Snow White retelling. And this one is so unique because the premise of this is, what if Rapunzel was the evil queen from Snow White? So it's a very cool crossover. It has some feminist vibes in it. We've got some friendship in here. I really like Carolyn Turgeon's retellings because they're less about the romance and they're more about like the women and them like learning about themselves and friendship and things like that. The men kind of stink in her books, just so you know. So if you're looking for something super romantic, hers are not the ones to go with. But I enjoy her writing so much. Such a good fairy tale and good Rapunzel retelling. And again, I don't know if Fairest is considered adult or YA, but it leans more YA in my opinion. Also good for Snow White and also good for the villainous backstory prompt. 2 other Snow White retellings. So I've read Winter, again, final book in the Lunar Chronicles. The only one I didn't mention in here is Scarlet because I had so many other Beauty and the Beast Red Riding Hood retellings. Again, this is the final book in the Lunar Chronicles, and it is a retelling of Snow White, but it ties everything together. So love. So make sure you complete the series. Then we have Mirror Mirror from Gregory Maguire. This is a Snow White retelling. This is adult. It's a fairy tale. It's very strange. Like, his writing is so weird, but I did enjoy this one. I gave it 4 stars, but just know that there's like adult content in here. He adds just weird stuff in his book sometimes, some weird sexual stuff, weird stuff about womanhood, but I still enjoyed this one. I think I liked this one more than Wicked, and if you want something more grown up and adult, I would check this one out. His books are also beautiful. So cool. I need to read the rest of them because there were 2 that I hated, and then I enjoyed this one and Wicked, so I need to make my mind up on whether or not I want to keep reading his books, but I do recommend this one. Then I have 1 Sleeping Beauty retelling. I don't think I've read any other Sleeping Beauty retellings. So we have Once Upon a Dream, A Twisted Tale by Liz Braswell. This is my favorite of the Twisted Tale books that I've read so far. I think I've read 3 or 4. This was like a solid 4-star. It's a very unique retelling. So this is What If Sleeping Beauty Never Woke Up? It has a very unique plot and premise. I really liked it. It got a little bit dark and a little bit heavier than I was expecting for these Disney books, but in like a good way. And I just so enjoyed it. It have all kinds of twisted tales, so be sure and check them out. But this was my favorite and the most unique. Next up is Snow White and Rose Red, which is different than the Snow White fairy tale. I grew up with this fairy tale and it's one of my favorites. And I don't know if it's considered like when Snow White was a girl or if they're just totally separate, but Snow and Rose by Emily Winfield Martin is a nice retelling. This is a middle grade retelling that is just so lovely, and it follows the original pretty well, but is very unique. And it's just such a beautiful book to read. It has such beautiful art. It's set in the woods, it's very cozy, but it's got that dark fairy tale vibe about it, and such a good middle grade. So I highly, highly recommend this one. So once they lived in a big home with a spectacular garden and an army of servants. Once they had a father and a mother who loved them more than the sun and the moon, but that was before their father disappeared into the woods and their mother disappeared into sorrow. And this is their story. It's so precious. I love it so much. Next up is Hansel and Gretel. I have one retelling for you. I plan on reading another one for the readathon, but that is Sweetly by Jackson Pierce. Again, this is part of the Jackson Pierce series, the first one being Sisters Red, which was the Red Riding Hood retelling, and this is the second one. It won't completely ruin them if you read them out of order, but they just tie together and they have Easter eggs, so I really recommend going in order. But Sweetly is so good. You can binge this whole series. So this is a retelling of Hansel and Gretel. So in this one, the child, Gretchen's twin sister, was taken by a witch in the woods, and ever since, Gretchen and her brother Hansel have felt the long branches of the witch's forest threatening to make them disappear too. Years later, when their stepmother casts Gretchen and Hansel out, they find themselves in sleepy Live Oak, South Carolina, and they're invited to stay with Sophia Kelly, a beautiful candy maker who molds sugary magic, coveted treats that create confidence, bravery, and passion. So good. I enjoyed this one so much. Next, we have The Snow Queen. And so again, we have Cold Spell by Jackson Pierce. This is the final book in the quartet. The third book is a Little Mermaid retelling that I also love, but I wanted to kind of keep this short. So this is a Snow Queen retelling that is so fantastic. So Kai and Ginny grew up together, best friends since they first played in their building's rooftop rose garden. Now they're 17 and their relationship has developed into something sweeter, complete with stolen kisses and plans to someday run away together. But one night, Kai disappears with a mysterious stranger named Mora, a beautiful girl with a dark past and a heart of ice. Refusing to be cast aside, Jenny goes after them and is thrust into a world that she never imagined. So magical, so good, great winter vibes as well. Love. Keeping up with the winter vibes, the next fairy tale is Princess and the Goblin King, which I'm not as familiar with that particular fairy tale, but I know that Winter Song is a loose retelling of that. So like in the Princess and the Goblin King, I think the princess gets sucked into this world and she has to like tell the Goblin King stories to keep him from like murdering her or something like that. But this is one of my favorite books ever. This was my favorite book of 2020. It's part of a duology, but I really recommend just reading the first one. I didn't love the second one. And in this one, all her life, Liesl has heard tales of the beautiful, dangerous Goblin King. They've enraptured her mind and spirit and inspired her musical compositions. Now 18 and helping to run her family's inn, Liesl can't help but feel that her musical dreams and childhood fantasies are slipping away. But when her sister is taken by the Goblin King, she has no choice but to journey to the underground to save her. So this is so good. It feels like a fever dream. It has winter vibes. Again, this is a YA, but has like a little bit more spiciness in it towards the end. Such a good romance. I loved it so much. I didn't love the narrator for the audiobook. I preferred to physically read it, but I so enjoyed this one and it would be great for the readathon. Okay, you guys, so that is my list of some fairy tale retellings for you to check out. Let me know which ones sound good to you down below in the comments. Let me know if you plan on reading any of these for the readathon. Stay tuned for my Retoldathon TBR coming out very soon. We're about ready to get started. I'm getting everything ready. I'm so excited. Don't forget the hashtag is Retoldathon and to follow me on Instagram at The Bright Side Girl. I'll be doing a ton of posting on there during the readathon as well. And I will see you guys next time on The Bright Side.